And we are live. Thank you all for tuning in tonight to the Black Liberation Movement podcast. Every Thursday night at 7 o'clock, we bring it your way. I like to say to all the viewers that's about to be on, and that's gonna be shared into this broadcast. We want to say power and peace. We want to say hotel. We want to say Habari Gun. We want to say Assalamu alaikum. We want to say whatever greeting you deem necessary. Free the land uh, that you feel necessary and appropriate for you. But I'm very excited tonight. I'm very excited tonight about this podcast tonight. Even though we had a few rearrangements in this particular podcast tonight, it's still going to be what I consider a very profound podcast tonight. We're going to have a very profound show tonight because of the quality of person that we have on the show tonight for viewers to see and hear and to learn. The Bible has been very profound in my development as a liberator and a person that's for the advancement and betterment and empowerment of our people. We pushing for Black power. We don't apologize for that. We're gonna push for Black power to our last breath. And so let's go ahead on and introduce the show tonight. The show tonight, if Sister Chris can put it up there, we want to talk about some things that we put in our newsletter, this edition, this newsletter, because we coming up to Juneteenth weekend. Juneteenth weekend, and we're about to embark upon a sojourn here in Mississippi where we're going to be conducting a whole Juneteenth weekend. We got the fifth edition of the Mississippi on the Move Town Talk that will be taking place tomorrow night in Natchez, Mississippi, where we'll be down with Brother Nick Bezel and the citizens of Natchez, Mississippi, the cotton capital of the South for a very long time. And we want to go down there and we want to have very profound conversation with those people down there in Natchez as it pertains to the liberation of Black people and what it is that we want to try and get done in the great state of Mississippi with our people. So we had Baba Kamal Kareem, who is a counselor to the Black Liberation Movement and the agenda that we pushing forward in Mississippi, do an article concerning Juneteenth, the holiday that had been created, a created holiday that Biden made a national holiday. And we want to talk about Juneteenth amongst other things tonight. But it was an article that Baba Kamal Kareem wrote, and we posted it in the newsletter because I thought it was very interesting. How you doing, Sister Miller? Glad you're on. You're going to find this program tonight be very, very, very interesting and effective. But Baba Kamal Kareem wrote an article, and Sister Crystal released the article today in the newsletter. I hope you all who subscribe to our newsletter get our newsletter so that you can see this article and have it in your archive. But I want to read this article, and hopefully our very special guest tonight. We was going to have Bob Kamal Kareem on, but he's not with us tonight. But we have a very, very, very special guest that's dear to my heart and dear to the work that it is that we do. He's going to come on and help us expound tonight. So Baba Shabaka Africa is who we have backstage tonight. And Baba Africa, I want you to listen to this article that Baba Kamal Kareem wrote concerning Juneteenth. And we want to point out some things. And as you come on and pretty much introduce yourself, I want you to kind of expound on these things once we bring you on board. But this is the article. The article reads, "My people, Black people, are out of our economic minds." And the article goes, "Last week, while waiting for the NBA playoff finals, I watched the pregame show that had 4 NBA players in a question and answer skit. The players who are African American NBA stars were asked by the television host whose face is on a $100 bill. To my surprise and dismay, two of the multi-million dollar contract players could not answer the question. Sadly, jokingly, they did not even have a clue. This incident, go ahead and stroll it up because you caused me to jump. Okay, that's good. I think you went. Okay, there it is. This incident made me realize the financial literacy among our young people is at an all-time low. In another instance, multi-billion-dollar chain Walmart put great value ice cream on its store shelves throughout the country. Juneteenth is now a national holiday commemorating the so-called emancipation of American slaves in the in the 1860s. Africans in Texas heard about the proclamation in the month of June. First, I first I have great reservations about the overall U.S. Juneteenth deception. To be emancipated is not to be confused with being liberated, for emancipation is still one form of possession to another. Can we stroll up to the top of the next column? Okay. Second, I do not need the Biden administration to exploit my people's enslavement by making an intelligent, deceptive act a national holiday as if the good old white folks are doing us Negroes a humanitarian favor, getting our political capital without anything in return. Okay, here we go. We good. I think you moved a little too far. Okay. Third, we should be sick and tired of constant financial manipulations of our heritage, narrative, and culture. Case in point, Apple Computer Corporation uses our red, black, and green flag for its phone watches and other accessories. Gucci, with its use of African heritage themes and colors for purses and apparel. And let us not forget the white businessman Ted Harris, CEO of Bankum, CEO of Bankum, who applied for the U.S. trademark of Juneteenth in general. My people, black people, are we out of our economic minds? I say the astounding answer is yes. We have a $1.1 trillion spending economy, but lack of business ownership. We should rather be stuck in the inclusion. We would rather be stuck in the inclusion of white professionalism rather than doing something for ourselves in the way of owning our own business. We would rather not support one another, depend on government funding, and let foreign nationals exploit the constant economic disunity in our community. Further, we are notorious for spending our money on the wrong thing. We would rather buy coloration products, clothes, fast food, entertainment, and hardly anything on education, sadly enough. General cycles of poverty are produced that has led to pandemic levels of chronic health, divorce, substance abuse, neglect, and illicit behaviors of every kind. My people, black people, are we out of our economic mind? An astounding yes. Baba Kamal Kareem, Pragmatic Nationalism, Counselor General of the Black Liberation Movement. So, I want to bring for my very profound teacher that had a major impact on my life and the work that we do. A lot of you all have heard me quote him many times in any form or whenever before people are doing this podcast. He had been that profound in my life. Let's bring on Baba Shabaka Afrika. How you doing, Baba?
I'm doing the best I can, brother. How about yourself?
I'm doing fairly well, Baba.
Good,
Uh,
good, good.
Good to hear from you, Baba. Would you like to have some words just to introduce yourself to the people that's looking? Just a brief introduction.
Well, as brother told you, my name is Shabaka Afrika. I'm in West Memphis, Arkansas. and we've been here a while. We've had a bookstore, cultural center, and a couple of other businesses here since 90, around 93. We just completed our 29 years of having been here. And we have been talking about acting on discussing black liberation and looking for a way to center ourselves and transfer what we have learned into a usable narrative. You were talking about uh, black people out of their economic minds. Well,
Mm-hmm.
black people have never been in any kind of mind because we're captives and we are domesticated. So, to that extent, the so called black man in America isn't even black uh, in terms of a political understanding of what that term means. Black people wouldn't allow themselves to exist in economic, political, and social and physical bondage. Black people would not allow their children to go to so-called schools with a European curriculum. Black people wouldn't worship the gods and pledge allegiance to the flags and symbols of those who enslaved them, because black people would know that doesn't make sense. But the American Negro uh, is a different matter. Now, if you want to talk about the economic, political, and social conditions of the American Negro, he's about where he's supposed to be. He's about where his mind will allow him to be. Some years ago, about 30, 40 years ago, Professor Molefi K. Asante, I believe is at Temple University, I believe he coined the phrase Afrocentricity. It's not a new idea. It's just that he sort of presented it more succinctly. It's no different than Dr. Garvey, Marcus Garvey presented us. It's no different than to what Honorable Elijah Muhammad presented us, that the black man needs to do something for himself. That means that we need to own our own humanity. We need to own our own information. We need to be in charge of our own image. For 400 plus years, someone else has shaped that image. We're captured people. And there are four major things that a civilized people must have in order to exist as a free and proud people on the planet. Uh, you must have self knowledge, which means having a functioning uh, definition of what it means to be black. What does that mean? Does it mean just skin color? You must have self defense, and you must practice self reliance. Otherwise, you're just a slave. You talked about emancipation, uh, Juneteenth. Well, I guess Juneteenth is nice. Uh, they celebrated that down where I'm from in southern Arkansas up until about the time that I was born. That's in the early 50s. But my father told me that was a big holiday for them. And it was an attempt on the part of these people who had been slaves and now were still slaves, but under a different terminology. They were living under Jim Crow, which is slavery by another name.
Mm-hmm.
And so they celebrated this thing called the 19th of June. I never heard the term Juneteenth until about 30, 40 years ago. So I'm not against black folk having dates, holidays to celebrate. But if you're not African centered, if you're not black, it's just another day to eat barbecue and drink beer, have a good time. We need more than that. But uh, we haven't built those institutions. So here we go. If you want to talk about race, politics, America, you got to talk about the transatlantic slave trade, where tens of millions of our ancestors were brought across the water and subjected to all kind of hell. It's almost too numerous for us to go into. You got to talk about 250 years of chattel slavery, not 25, 250 years of chattel slavery, where you're raped, exploited, murdered, mind murdered, and on and on and on. Then you got to
Mm-hmm.
talk about the last 150 to 170 years of Jim Crow laws and policies, which we still under, which is slavery by another name. So where's the emancipation? We have the illusion of emancipation. We don't own anything. Then you got
Mm-hmm.
the genocide of the native peoples, which many of us are related to in so many ways. So they murdered the indigenous people in order to make room to create wealth for themselves, and they brought our ancestors here for two things: for labor, free sex.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever wonder why there's so many different colors of so-called black folk, so many different hair textures from high yellow to blue black, they brought us here for free labor and free sex. Now, you've got to reconcile yourself to these things that I've talked about. I'm not smarter than anybody else, but if you don't reconcile yourself to what brought us here, we were here for free labor and free sex. I don't hear anybody talking about that. That shapes our thinking, it shapes our political ideology. And
Right.
let me go back to what I said earlier. The average so-called black man in America is not black.
Mm-hmm.
He is an American Negro, which means he is domesticated like you domesticate cattle. You got black folk pledging allegiance and singing an anthem that was written by a slave owner. I mean, how crazy is that? It would be like people in the Ashkenazi Jews or European Jews uh, pledging during the Heil Hitler, when Hitler was the
Mm-hmm.
one that murdered and killed them. So
Mm-hmm.
the Star Spangled Banner was written by a slave owner named Francis Scott Key. One of his relatives, later in 1857, was Supreme Court Justice Roger B. Taney, who handed down the majority opinion in the Supreme Court case of the Dred Scott decision, where he said that colored men or black men have no rights that white men are bound to respect. And this is
Right.
what the Donald Trump contingency is telling you now. You have any rights? We don't care about you or nothing. We'll make up decisions. The white boy that went into Buffalo and killed 10 black folk, or Dylan Roof that went into the church in South Carolina a few years back and killed those people. He's afraid of you. He's afraid of your presence here. And we ain't even talking about self-defense yet.
Right. Let me stop you right there, Bob, because I want to kind of go back because I'm noticing people who's coming onto the broadcast, and I'm looking at age range, and I want to do something because I'm running into, and we run into, as we out here, you know, propagating Mississippi on the move. And one of the things that we want to try and do with Mississippi on the move is bring historical retention to our people. We have to bring history back into the perspective of what it is that we're doing right now and how we even come to this point. And you have, for the years that I've known you, you have done a great job with that with me. But I want the people that's listening in at you tonight. I want you to kind of delve a little bit deeper into the captured aspect of our people being captured because we both have a teacher. I call myself a third generation product, uh, Dr. Isaac Richmond,
Yes.
the author of a very profound writing, and we both know how well Dr. Richmond writes. The book House Negro, House Niggers,
Thank you.
Politics of Oppression.
Get that
Yeah,
straight now.
yeah, get straight. House Niggers, Politics of Oppression.
Uh-huh.
And in a lot of the personal talks that me and Dr. Richmond have had, one of the most profound things that Dr. Richmond said, and you echoing it right now, one of the most profound things that Dr. Richmond told me, he said, Brother Patrick, we are a domesticated people, and that really stuck with me. As a matter of fact, the book that I'm composing now, I'm trying to write, is called Domesticated Labor, Liberation in the Birth Canal. And both of you all were very inspirational in that writing that I'm putting together. But speak to the domestication of the African as he came and was dragged or brought into this type of servitude to produce what is today supposed to be a permanent underclass. Speak to that domestication process.
So let me give a shout out to a great brother, uh, the late Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who was the president of Ghana. He was the first president of the so-called new state of Ghana that had received this liberation from Great Britain. Now, keep something in mind. No man has the power to free you. No man has the power to enslave you unless you participate in that enslavement yourself. Dr. Nkrumah, who died around 1970, but who was inaugurated as the first president in Ghana in 1957, Dr. King and Brother Johnson from Ebony Magazine, they both were in attendance, and it was lauded by black people around the world as a new day, as the end of colonialism. What it was, in fact, was the beginning of neo-colonialism, where the European nations no longer rule you directly, but they rule you through their proxies and their minions, and house Negroes and coons and whatnot. And so he said this, he said, when a colonized people, and I like to replace that with enslaved people, fail to overthrow their colonizer, the natural political consequences arise of a reactionary class of blacks that he called the petty bourgeoisie, who would join with their oppressor to oppress their people to benefit themselves.
Mm.
This is the trap when enslaved people fail to overthrow their oppressors. Then, when they don't overthrow them, the only other option is to become them or to
Mm.
become like them. And so, therefore, you begin to see yourself through their eyes and their perspectives. If you will take a look at every serious coon that we have in America, like a Herschel Walker or Tim Scott, South Carolina, and on and on and on, you will hear they parrot the same narratives as do their white masters or those who sponsor them. They are not black. The
Mm.
problem is most of us are not black. We do not have a black agenda. In fact, even in the discussion of blackness, even semi-blackness, you'll hear these Negroes start to offer excuses and apologies. Like Juneteenth, I just heard the old lady, they love the old lady that they say was the one that kind of kept Juneteenth going. She says now it stands for freedom, but not just for black folks. It has the apology.
Right,
How come it can't
right.
be freedom just for me? I'm the one oppressed. So who else is it for? And even if there are other people oppressed, that does not take away from them. So you see, we start there. Well,
Mm-hmm.
if I can recall when we talk about blacks specifically, well, it's poor whites. Well, poor whites and blacks are not the same. Stop with
Mm-hmm.
that.
No
That gets
doubt.
on my nerves. Or you'll see people ask you, well, can you forgive him for killing those 10 people? And then somebody say, well, yeah, because I'm a Christian. I'm
Mm.
required to. So if being a Christian means that I have to allow people to murder and slaughter me for generations, and I take no actions, then I don't want to be a Christian.
Mm.
If being a Christian means that I have to kowtow and accept subjugation as a natural and normal phenomenon of life, then I don't want to be that.
Mm.
If integration means that I have to submit to someone else's system, I don't want to integrate. Now,
Mm.
people ask me all the time, uh, and you can tell uh, domesticated Negroes, uh, those are people who are not black, they just have dark skin. So
Mm.
there's a difference between people with dark skin, and dark skin can be from high yellow to blue black. I've explained that, so don't get twisted up by what color somebody is. I want to see what color your politics and your spirit is. If you're a
Right.
black man, your eyes can be blue, but you're committed to an agenda, to a vision, to a purpose, to a
Mm-hmm.
lifestyle that says that my purpose on this planet is the liberation to the people to which I was born. An American Negro can't do that because the American Negro spends his life trying to get access to things that white men have the final word in. I understand
Okay,
that. Uh-huh.
right. So let me get in right there,
Go
Bob.
ahead.
And I see some brothers that come on, that's boots on the ground down there in Brookhaven, Mississippi right now, preparing for a protest about, some things that we get that we experiencing here in Mississippi that we're gonna start addressing more profoundly than even what they're doing right now on the ground. I commend them brothers, and I'm glad that they own brother Marquell and brother JoJo. But let's go right here, Baba. Because as we traverse this state with what it is we doing with Mississippi on the Move, uh, which is a very valiant effort to go into black townships and begin to talk to the critical uh, black people, and hashing out critical black people in these conversations that we trying to draw these people out. What we running into, what we're experiencing, is the capitulated leadership of the black community. I mean, when we go all throughout Mississippi, we run into black townships everywhere. We run into a lot of capitulated leadership, and is what you make very plain, in your language, and I think it's very effective. It's a very effective term uh, called the coon. The coon is orchestrating things in the black community, and you told me something very powerful about the coon. You told me, you said that the coon hate black people, but they black. You said the coon hate black people. That's what you told me, Bob. And another thing that I'm picking up as we matriculate through these towns, I'm looking for the black politician. I'm talking about that person that we elected to represent us in whatever capacity that they represent us. I'm looking for the black profession. These are the black people with so-called skill sets that's doing things in our community. And I'm looking for the the black preacher. This is a major influencer in our community. Now, these people are coming out, but I'm finding that they very compromised people. They doing exactly what it is that you're talking about. They ain't never really had a critical black conversation. They having a coonish conversation. And I don't even know if our people have the aptitude to bring this type conversation to them. But this is what Mississippi on the Move is doing. But what I'm trying to get to is that these people, these people that's leaders in the black community, have what I have heard you say, crafted an ideology of avoidance when it comes to our liberation. Would you agree with that?
So when I talk to, and I'm always talking, I'm in a research mode, and I've been doing this since probably the mid '80s. I've been having conversations with so-called black leaders about the economic, political, and social reality of black folk, which we all agree is not where it ought to be. And so as I began to discuss, analyze, and critique the historical circumstances that have led us, or certainly perhaps might have led us to this point, I find that there's a disconnect. They do
Mm,
not want to have an open and honest conversation, because that open and honest conversation about the transatlantic slave trade, 250 years of child slavery, 150 to 170 years of Jim Crow and the genocide of Native Americans, requires then that they take a position on what it means to be black. Well, they're not black because they are seeking access and favor with the system that has been inherited from slavery and slave masters. And so the black preacher is probably one of the main mechanisms on how to domesticate a people culturally is to define for them their pathway to God, the theology. So that's
mhm,
why you see that the theology practice in the black church is not consistent in any way to the power needs of black folk. In fact, I would argue that it is anti-revolutionary. And so instead of us seeking power through our God, we seek escapism, and we're literally competing with getting to heaven and outer space after we die. And see, now when you present to these people a different way of looking at themselves and giving them the truth of history and the truth of their historical relationship with the white Western world, then you have cognitive dissonance that comes in, which means that the truth conflicts with their core value system. And that core value system has been driven out of slavery, and it's the foundation of is fear, greed, and jealousy. So you
Mhm.
literally are presenting to a person that's not really fully human. He's a domesticated beast, again, that was brought here fundamentally for his free labor and his free sex. There's no other reason of why these people that are now called Africans, keep in mind, it was not called Africa initially. And certainly the people from the continent did not give it that name. It's important that you know that these names, where they originate from. And so what you have in America, I think the Willie Lynch letter, most people have heard of it, gives a indication once you domesticated this people, that becomes their reality. Now,
Mm.
whether, and then when you bring truth to that reality, then 99% of them are going to fight you. And so we spent most of our lives, and many before me, trying to write books and do lectures to try to explain to our people their condition. Dr. Woodson said it very well in 1933, which is 20 years before I was born, in the great miseducation of the Negro. He puts it clearly. He said the problem with the Negro in America is that both his academic and his religious instruction came to him by way of his slave master. So
Mm.
what he's saying is, duh, what do you expect?
Right.
This ain't no black man. You
Right.
have got to be the originator of your thinking. Well,
Right.
you can't present that to a person in church. The black man in church is going to reject that. The black man in most religious organizations, he's bought into whatever the religious dogma is of his religion. He's not going to hear anything else. In fact, he may kill you for presenting that. They'll say, I notice this is what I hear. Uh, you hate white folks, don't you? Uh,
Right.
you don't believe in God. You must be a Muslim. And the latest one, by some people, is funny. They said, well, I can't talk to you. You smarter than me. I said, no, that's a new one. But the point is, they are deflecting. And so when they asked the black woman up in Buffalo, or black man in Buffalo, do you forgive this man? Now, keep in mind, nobody asked any other race or ethnic group, do they forgive their murderers? Only black folk. When you hear forgiveness, when you
Right.
hear nonviolence, you know we're talking about black folk, because the world is not comfortable with black folk off the plantation. The world ain't comfortable with black folks unless they come there. They're scared to death that same power that gives you the power to fly through the air before you dunk that ball, they're afraid that if that power becomes intellectual and then it has a political outcome, then we'll begin to dominate uh, parts of much of the world as we should. How can I be safe in a world unless I have rulership over it? I cannot.
Right.
And our history shows us that. So when you talk about the Negro preacher, well, unfortunately, that once you embrace the religion, the religious dogma
Mm.
that was invented in Rome by conquerors, and then developed specifically to manipulate, control, and exploit ignorant European masses, and you got all these people coming from this continent called Africa, and now they're stuck here in this country. Now they're giving them a white man's language, a white man's religion, a white man's concept of beauty, a white man's entire worldview, and then now we expect him to be black just through
Mm.
osmosis. Well, you would think his experiences alone should be a great teacher, but these are people who are trying to avoid pissing off those that enslaved them, and plus, because the white man invented, you understand, white, the idea of race is an invention. So they invented race and then made themselves the top of the racial hierarchy, and then they control the resources and the psychology of everything in it. And if you want to get access, if you want a job, if you want a house, if you want to be comfortable, you got to go along with the system. Otherwise, you're going to be labeled as a troublemaker. They may assassinate you. And they'll send every house Negro in the world after you. And you know what they'll say? That nigga
Was that
crazy. He ought to known better than to do that. And that's where
right?
we are today. And it's frustrating to serious black folk that are trying to awaken our people. It's
Mm,
frustrating. And it's
no
understood
doubt.
it's frustrating. But um, that's just the job. It's an
Mm-hmm.
impossible task. That just means it's going to take a little longer. It is
Mm,
impossible. It just means it's going to take a little longer. The main thing that I can say for those serious black folk, and even some of our Negroes that are trying to be black, is that you need to create spaces, and we need to create a curriculum. Uh,
stop right there before you go there, Doc, because I wanted that to kind of come in after we do this because that's the answer. We get into the solution now. But before we get to the solution, I want to put some more things out there because you were about to get to the solution. Let me ask you a question because we don't get this. What we're getting right now, we don't get it. This generation, I'm talking about the teaching that we get, the transverbalization from a master teacher to the student. This not in the classrooms. Black people not experiencing it. I mean, we don't have the John Henry Clarks, the Joseph Benyakins, and the Ivan Van Sertima. They not here with us, So I take it a great privilege, as I see, some of the people that's watching tonight. We don't have this. You know what we have, Bob? We have social media. We have memes that we read. We may have every now and then somebody may share a quote from Kwame Ture, every now and then. But how long did that stick? We don't have the teaching. Well, I'm looking in your face and I'm receiving uh, the wisdom. I can see it. I can feel the energy. We don't have it, and I think we don't even have a tolerance on some levels for it now. But I like being clear, and we don't have much time tonight because we want to hold our audience. We want to be clear. Let me ask you a very just a straight up question. Why do white people kill black people?
because they can,
Thank you. That's right.
and they will
Because they
continue,
can.
and they will continue until you stop them. One thing that one of our greatest scholars ever, Dr. John Heinrich, not Henry, Dr. John Heinrich Clark
Mm-hmm.
said that history is a set of events that is happening. I didn't say that did happen, but is happening, and it will continue to happen until you stop it from happening that way.
Mm,
And so, if you want a man to stop kicking your butt, then you need to assess your talent, skills, and resources, and you need to make plans to do that. Otherwise, not only will he do that to you, he will continue to do that, and he will believe, as he already does, that it's his place, it's his privilege. That's why people talk about white privilege. You know, we're not talking about what every white man does. And when we talk about white supremacy, we're not talking about what every white man does. We talk about systems. And
mm-hmm.
white privilege means that when the police stop them, they don't have to think about is may I get shot? You know, way back in 1973, uh, a very profound thinker, Richard Pryor, in his famous album, everybody ought to go out and get this album or YouTube it. And it's funny as hell, but it's filled with truth.
Mm,
It's called That Nigga's Crazy. And there's one thing he talked about: the black man gets stopped by the police, and he says to the police, he said, "I am reaching into my pocket for
mm,
my driver's license because I don't want to be no MF and accident." And what
mm,
he was saying in 1973, unarmed black men get shot by
mm-hmm.
police. What's the thing that you just asked me? That still happens. Unarmed black men continue to get shot. And the danger is that when you allow people to abuse you perpetually, generation after generation, that abuse becomes normal. You embrace that abuse and you begin to duplicate that abuse. And that's why we got so many wild, savage type dudes out here now that don't have no problem jumping over the counter and shooting your sister in the head who's working a part-time job at the all-night gas station because she doesn't regard her as human. He doesn't regard himself as human. And that comes from our having, and we allowed that because of our domestication, because the European man understood that if we were allowed to govern ourselves, see, black power and white supremacy cannot occupy the same space. I mean,
mm,
the logic
mm,
is white power, white supremacy, and black power cannot occupy the same space. In the world that we've existed in, only white men had authority to rule and had the last word. Any black man, there's one sitting right behind you, on that picture right behind you now, Brother Patrick.
mm-hmm,
When this
mm-hmm,
brother articulated that we had not only the option, but we had a responsibility to self-defense, he's been castigated and still castigated today when he
mm,
says we have a right to defend ourselves. Negro preachers will tell you that only God has a say in that. Well, guess what?
mm.
I operate as a proxy for the God of the universe. Every human being on planet Earth has not only the right, but has the responsibility of self-defense. If you can't defend yourself, you're not a human.
Hmm.
If you don't
Thank you.
defend yourself, you're not a human. So don't tell me you black, and then somebody asks you, do you defend this boy that came and murdered 10 people? And you say, well, I got to.
Hmm.
Why? Because you dumb and stupid?
Hmm.
No, because I'm a Christian. So that's not godly. It may be Christian, but that is not of God.
That's right.
Oppression is not of God. White supremacy is not of God. Black powerlessness is not of God. So the American Negro deludes himself into believing he's serving Lord because he went to church, but in fact, he's not. You're actually serving your slave master's value structure, and he requires that you be submissive. And so
Hmm.
now I get my reward in heaven after I'm dead. That's about the craziest crap. And I grew up listening to that as a child, thinking, this is stupid. Are you
Right.
really serious? But I couldn't say nothing as a little kid. You get a whooping, you
Hmm.
know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right. Right.
when you want to talk about what do we need to do, well, there's a lot of things we need to do. But I would say to serious brothers and sisters is, I'm not suggesting that you don't continue to teach and to write and to lecture and put it out in through any medium you can. But our focus needs to be on children. Proverbs says, and we've all heard this, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart. Now, it didn't say train up grown folks. It didn't say train up because in that story of the Exodus, if you'll notice in that story, when these people are leaving the so-called uh, uh, enslavement in the biblical Egypt, do not confuse that with the historical Egypt. This is an allegory, folks. Grow up now. But
That's
in
right.
that particular story, these people are in bondage, and the way to get them to freedom is to get them out of Egypt, certainly out of that mind, and get them toward a place that had a different set of values, a different psychology, a different economic, political, and social dynamic. And so they
Hmm.
call it the promised land. But if you remember in that story, all the people who left Egypt, only two who were adults upon leaving literally got to the promised land. Everybody else died. Only
Hmm.
those under the age of 20, only those that were under the age of adulthood, or those born along the way that actually got there. So what that tells us that it's hard to teach an old dog new trick. Is it impossible? No, but it's very improbable
Mm-hmm.
to get this generation of American Negroes to be different because he's
Right.
accepted this, and it may even be in his genetics by now. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But I know I can tell his actions. There's no way in the world that we should live in a world where everybody dominates us and everybody wants our labor, everybody wants our best, our athletic skills, they want our sexuality, whatever
Hmm.
that we have that's of value. If you're not in charge of you and don't have the last word, then someone else will exploit that. There's all kind of
Right.
scriptures I can think of to quote. But now, guess what? So you want to, if you think like these Negroes believe in God, start quoting scriptures that support what I'm saying and what you've been saying, and see how fast they reject it.
Exactly. Like this, ad lib onto what it is that you just explained about that whole exodus out of Egypt. I think it's somewhere in there where Moses or Aaron, whoever was leading the children of Israel out of Egypt, it was somewhere in there where they got confused because of the stiff neckness of the people. And one of them went back and petitioned God. And God The petitioner, whether it was Moses or Aaron, was confused because the people weren't doing right. And Moses said, you know, they ain't doing right, and he alluded to the old. And I think God responded and said, the God of the Bible, the God of this metaphor, said, well, let the old wander in the wilderness till they die, and take the young into the promised land.
My point exactly.
Okay.
And that's the point, is that those that are already domesticated are not likely to ever change. And you can talk to, I've got people, I know a dude right now. I've been talking to this dude at least 27 or 8 years. He still can't hear me.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, he has a demonic spirit. You know, the Bible talks about demonic spirit. There are people that have evilness in their hearts. I think
Mm-hmm.
Jesus said, I know you, you are of your father. He was a liar and a murderer. A lot of people have almost a genetic inclination toward. So when you talk about a coon, normally you're talking about an opportunistic spirit to begin with. And it's the spirit of greed. He understands that as long as he keeps the white men in his area happy, they'll then bestow him with certain gifts and certain privileges. And freedom for black folk, talking about that, think about this. There has never been a black man or woman in the history of the white Western world who has challenged white supremacy on behalf of black folk that the white supremacist system has embraced. Now think
Mm-hmm.
about that. I've heard people say, well, you know, I don't like that Farrakhan. He. I said, well, why? Well, he scares me. I said, well, scares you how? I said, I don't know if anybody he's killed or anybody he suggested we kill. I said, but you and your ancestors have murdered millions of human beings. You have slaughtered your way across civilization. So it would appear to me that we have far more to fear from you. You are the police. You are the judges. You are the businessmen. We live in your world. I had a white
Mm-hmm.
judge that when I was president of NAACP, and we invited him to come and talk to us, not because we loved him, but we wanted him to come and inform us about how that system works. So he sat there and he began to look around. I said, what's wrong? He said, well, I'm checking out the chair to see if it's got an electric in it. He was What he was saying was, coming down here talking to me, other whites had told him I might beat him up or kill him. And I smiled. I said, listen to him.
Right.
This man puts people like me away every day, and he talks ugly to us. We have far more fear from him, but you understand, in his mind, his reality is white men only rule. And that's why you saw uh, these January 6th. There are people that are afraid that they're going to be displaced by the people who were brought here as enslaved. Now, we should be afraid of them, but they're afraid that we're going to rise up. That's why you hear this little boy that killed those people talking about we're going to displace them. And I'm trying to figure out now what black folk you know talking about this, talking about displacing white. Everybody black I know talking about being fair, and they don't
Mm-hmm.
mind. Black folk have accepted an inferior position as long as you give us a little something. Let me have a 2014 Escalade and a little old house. We're happy. I'm doing better than I ever did. They'll tell you right quick. We come a long way. I said, okay. But
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
what I think is, for serious black folk, we need to consider it. Take a look at our history. Take a look at all the black men and women that have come before us that were activists, revolutionaries, or scholars who attempted to articulate an agenda and a vision for black folk. That's what the Promised Land is about. It's about the articulation of an agenda driven by a vision for the Hebrew, uh, and the Promised Land is about a psychology of independence and promoting self-defense, self-awareness, and self-reliance. That's all that
Mm-hmm.
is. If you're looking at, black folk go to church every Sunday for 50 years and look at that story and never understand it because they don't want to. Because unless you're black, you're not going to see it. The American Negro can never find freedom. Freedom, only black people. And so real black folk have to establish curriculums that can teach generations of black children global systems, slavery, Jim Crow, to make sure we understand and have a clear understanding and picture an actionable understanding. I mean, an actionable something that we can convert into in the narratives and into political unceasing political action. You can't get people who do not understand that history. They don't have the ability. They don't have the tools to be able to think that way. The reason that I can think this way and you think this way, partly because some of us are born different and we have availed ourselves of study. Most of us have read. Don't ever trust a nigga. When a Negro don't read, he can never be trusted because he does not have a proper understanding of anything.
Mm,
If you don't study,
mm.
you don't know anything. So how you going to debate and create anything? Our children need to understand global geography. We need to understand wealth, production. Need to understand how the enslavement of Africans has created a level of wealth in this world unseen in the annals of history, and that something on the eve of the Civil War, the 11 states that seceded from the Union that you call the South were the fourth largest economy in the world.
Stop.
Fueled the
Stop,
entire
Bobby.
global textile industry.
Stop before you go there, because that's a big part of Mississippi on the Move and what it is that we want to bring out, what you're about to go to. But I want to go back to this thing and see, I get captivated. I don't know about nobody else that's viewing it, but I get captivated just listening to you teach. And I heard you say once before that you wanted that platform to teach. And I got infuriated. I can remember almost wanting to get into a full blown argument with you and ask you, why are you dealing with the NAACP, a historical uh, organization that basically frustrate the hell out of me, but I come to understand things better. But what I'm saying is this, Bob. You use the word actional, and it's a very profound word in this day and time. But just listening to you and what it is that we're doing with the Black Liberation Movement, we have people on here tonight, educators. One, my beloved brother in Philadelphia, PA, Professor Carl Tone Jones. I don't know if you got a chance to meet Carl, but this is a brother that been, 100 with the Black Liberation Movement and things that we have been trying to pragmatically put together. We have touched, uh, connected with people all across the nation, and we trying to get the right educators to begin to try to put these type of curriculum that you're talking about together, and so that we can be actionable about what it is that we're doing. Because Sister Crystal say something very profound. She said we keep learning at different rates and times. We got grown people just now beginning to even think about the idea of Black power and Black liberation. And the example that I use to try to explain to people what it is that I'm saying, when I'm saying this, and when Sister Crystal say, we learn it at different rates and times, I try and make people understand clearly what that means. If you have a 8-year-old child that don't know their ABCs, you would simply say, what that child's developmentally slow.
Yeah.
That child is functioning illiterate. Why are you saying that? 8-year-old child. You're saying that because there's a certain time that is allotted for a child growing up in this society to know their ABC. Black people should know, what a global system is. Our children should understand it. Our children should understand the dynamics of what slavery produced. Our children should understand right here in Mississippi, the state that most replicate plantation economy.
Excuse me. You
And
said dynamics. What the dynamics that it produced,
right,
which
I'm
means
saying
it's continuing.
it's continuing, exactly,
Yes.
so that they can do something about it, because we have conformed to it. We have
Yes.
been, yeah, we have conformed to it. These children will do something about it. So we got people like Crystal Denise, Carl Tone Jones, uh, and all these people, Akil Parker, that's creating a whole system of math called histomathematics, where he merges history and math. And the man is
Oh,
very
beautiful.
intriguing to me. Oh man, merging history and math. Mega Eggers Evers Edgar walked to school 12 miles every day. And I'm learning as this man teaching. He said, so how many miles did Mega ever walk to school in a year? It becomes a very intriguing
Oh yeah, I
method.
love it.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
love it.
It becomes a very intriguing method of teaching our children. So we got these type of people.
Yeah.
And it's about what do we do to put this together. We have the Ashe Academy, you know, we have the Ashe Academy that need to be financed and need to grow. We have that. So that's the thing that we're doing, Bob. But it's people like you that I want to be able to keep the energy up, to be the apparatus that carry the message to our people. I'm depressed a lot of times. I'm disappointed a lot of times. But
Me too.
I know, we have many talks, Bobby,
Yes.
but I'm still of the belief, that we can change the course of this thing, as we saying today, shift the paradigm. So I kind of wanted you to kind of speak to that creating of that curriculum.
You know, and like you were talking about the brother you just mentioned. Now he's had an idea that I didn't have that idea, but immediately when you told me, it makes sense. And see, we're both learning mathematics at the same time that we're learning about the sacrifice, the commitment of Medgar Evers. So now we're going to learn about Medgar Evers. We're going to understand what drove him to do what he did, and we're going to understand what drove people to kill him and others like him. So now, and that's beautiful. I love it. I love my idea, and I'm not smart enough to do it. My idea is that the scientific and the mathematical and the history uh, and the divine ought to be the same. That for
Mm,
African children, uh, it's not enough for us to just get the so-called academic education, but our purpose has to be the liberation, and that's a higher purpose. The American, one writer said the Euro-American concept of education and religion is inadequate for black children. I'll go beyond inadequate. It's counter-revolutionary. It's
mm,
put there specifically to miseducate us and to misdirect us. And therefore, once you misdirect the people through that domestication, then you misdirect their resources, energies, and potential. And so, with the advent of social media, and let me say this: uh, if you're going to use social media for this purpose, the world the world does not want black people to be free. The world economy, and that's what I was about to make, the entire world economy for hundreds of years has been based upon the subjugation of Africa. It still is. Colonization, uh, the African continent, and by the way, if at some point we want to change that name, then so be it. But the African continent is still, after hundreds, perhaps thousands of years of rape of its gold, its diamonds, its hydroelectricity, and whatever other mineral resources, and its people, it's still the richest continent in the world and is the most populous. So now we need to understand that I'm not a minority. But with social media, and I was about to say, we want to use social media as a platform to get out our information and our word to our people. We better be about the business of creating our own social media outlets. Now, some of these
mm,
smart young folk out here who understand that, I'm looking at you to do that. I can tell you what we need to know in terms of how the world has gotten us to this point. But you're going to have to take what you learned based on what I've learned, based on what people before me learned, and take it to another level. Our our children need to be understanding global systems and learning how to develop new systems in which they dominate in the
mm,
world.
mm,
You know, a doctor, brother from San Francisco State, not to, his name will come to me sooner or later. He said we made it was in a Black Studies conference about 30 some odd years ago. I hope that name comes to me. Uh, he said that we need to make a decision. What is our purpose? Is it integration or
mm,
world domination? I never
mm.
thought about it that way.
Right,
Because see, other people
right.
think in terms of global domination. Europeans and Russia, well, they Europeans, the Asian, Chinese, they think about how they're going to control the world, or at least pieces of it, and they think about how they're going to control you and your resources. This is why China and Russia are powerful in Africa today. Our children need to understand that at the very least, Africa, our homeland, is something that we should own, but we don't own it in our minds and in our hearts. We have to have a curriculum and a concept of God that promotes and centers us. That's why Dr. Malifi Asante talked about Afrocentricity or Black centeredness. This is why Garvey and all these people are considered Black nationalism. You see, Blacks, whites more or less operate under white nationalism, pledge allegiance. I mean, they're committed to those things that are white. It's symbols, it's flags, it's all the red, white, and blue for America, red, white, and blue for Britain, red, white, and blue for the Christian, red, white, and blue for Arkansas, Tennessee. So they have symbols. We are white nationalists. Some people say that we are Negropeans or chocolate-covered white people because we don't own a there's no Black nationalism that we're centered in. In fact, you will hear some Negroes say, well, as a mother of all deflections and false equivalency, well, I don't believe in white supremacy nor Black supremacy. And I say, well, let me ask you a question. I wasn't aware that anything called Black supremacy ever existed. Can you give me an example of somebody that practices Black supremacy or someone who's promoted it? Well, now you know you're talking to Negro. That's coon talk. Are you a Muslim? Don't allow people. I have as much right to be angry and upset and annoyed with them being an ignorant Negro as they do and being angry with me because I'm a Black man. You're always talking that Black, S-H-I-T. And that's why I told you you ought to play my man's poem. You remember that Black shit?
Bro, Kyle,
he wrote that.
Black shit.
He wrote that as an ode to all of us that have tried to make Blackness and Black folk relevant in the world. So I can talk about Black folk. Is that okay with you? Well, you know, you can't talk about that's racist. There's no such thing as a Black racist. There is no such thing as a Black racist. And when someone brings up, are you a racist? Then you need to shout them down. They shouldn't be allowed. That shouldn't be allowed to be said without being confronted, ever.
Right.
So that curriculum where we got Black, and this is a fantasy. I've got little Black kids all around the country and around the world tuning in online and on Zoom so we can have this curriculum that focuses on Black folk being African centered. So then now can learn about the Nile Valley civilizations. So we can learn about Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. So we can learn about Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey. I never heard of Marcus Garvey until I was way out of college. Isn't that something? One of the greatest Black men have ever walked. I never heard of him. I thought that a lot of us thought the Black Panthers were another gang until we got to looking closer. Because everything that we know, we learn through the ears of white people. Matter of fact, we say Egypt. There's no such thing as Egypt. That's a Greek term. It should be Kemet or Dr. Ben called it Tarmeret. But what Europeans have done, they have not only colonized spaces and places, they colonized time. They colonized our humanity in time. And now they replaced, you want to talk about replacement, they replaced us as the original people from Kemet and Ethiopia and present-day Sudan, and they make them in the movies white. So by default, if you don't say that Hannibal is a Black man, then he by default it becomes a white man. If the so-called savior of the world, Jesus the Christ or Yeshua the Christ, which we'll deal with that another time. Why is it always presented as a white man? Because the European understands colonizing people's minds and thoughts and their perceptions and their ability to create is also part of the colonization. This is why it's imperative that Black children have curriculum designed for liberation. It is designed for liberation, no other purpose. I ain't just trying to teach somebody how to read and write now. I'm trying to teach you how to run this world because there are people in this world
That's
who
right.
have made for 500 years, have made their living and their whole world view, their whole psychosexual sense of relevance is based on the degradation and subjugation of people that look like me. I don't
No
like
doubt.
it, but we have to do that. And
Right.
we have some great minds out there. We need social media, which means we're gonna. And then guess what? If you don't have self-defense, if you don't, if you don't talk about self-defense, if you don't think it and practice it, then somebody will just beat your ass and take it from you.
That's right.
Yes, they'll beat your ass and take your lunch money, like they do at school. They will beat up and kill mega Evers and take everything that you got from you. And
No
believe me,
doubt.
they have a right to do it. And they'll pass a law to justify. One other thing I wanted to mention. You want to talk about education. Now let's take a look at something. 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. You're talking about Juneteenth. So talking about the Emancipation Proclamation, which wasn't worth the paper it was written on. It was a
Mm,
political scheme by Abraham Lincoln. He didn't think it would pass the Supreme Court. And then you're
mm,
talking about the 13th Amendment that so-called outlaw slavery. And then the 14th Amendment and 15th Amendments, which makes you a citizen and give you the right to vote. Now, we spent the last 170 years fighting to protect the right to vote and protect our rights. You never have any more rights than you have the power to enforce.
that's
First
right.
of all, we shouldn't have to have any rights. We don't need to have no rights legislated in. No one else has. So think about that. And so in a curriculum, your children would grow up understanding that any system that they live in that has to confer rights on them is not a system that's godly and certainly not for them. So
That's
let's
right.
get clear about that. So now you got the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, but built into these amendments are what they call workarounds. That's one of my new words, workaround, that and spaces. I like to talk about creating spaces. And what's the workaround? Now I got a 13th Amendment that outlaws slavery, except for if you're in prison. So what do? They they create policies and structures that guarantee you go to prison. So you're not convict leasing. You got
Mm,
peonage and various forms of sharecropping and riding while black, dying while black, living
mm,
while black, going to hospital while black. It tells you 1964, 65, these civil rights bills. Well, guess what? They passed those bills in the 1860s and 70s. They were never enforced. And right now, the Supreme Court going to undermine all of them. What you going to do? You
mm,
still trying to be an American? Then if you're going to be an American, then take control of America. They're scared of it
mm,
anyway. If you're going
mm,
to vote, then have an agenda and teach your people why this is one of the things that we must do, not the thing. Somehow or another,
mhm.
we think all we need to do is vote. Well, guess what? Somebody will choose who you vote for, or they will take
Thank you.
away your right to vote. And that's what they're doing now. Don't you
Thank
see?
you. No doubt. No doubt. Let me say this, Bob. Thank you. Because you're so profound. I will say that. I hear you say a lot of times when we talking, you say, I don't know how effective I've been. You know, well, I know one thing, you being very effective right now. And you have been very effective in my life. And I hope to continue to push, your teaching because when people hear me, they ain't hearing me. They hear what I have absorbed from. Put that picture of Dr. Richmond and me and Barbara Shabaka up. This picture years ago. But you're very profound, Barbara. But I want to stay true to what I'm telling the people. I ask the people to, if you have any questions for Barbara Shabaka, post your question. Put your questions in the comments. We have a brother that put a question in the comment. Let me get back up to it. And as I get back up to it, he's referencing Juneteenth. But it's a similar thing that's taking place with Kwanzaa when I look at his question.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I know it's a similar thing that's taking place with Kwanzaa, and I know you were very profound, have been very profound, with Kwanzaa in the Memphis Mid South area, in the past. But brother Ulysses T.K. Hunt, he said, who benefits the most from Juneteenth? Or is it a balance as far as market goes? Who's benefiting the most from Juneteenth? I think that's an economic question.
Well, any system in which you don't control, those at the top benefit from it. They'll sell you the paraphernalia, and I don't want to diminish what the because I'm not a huge, I don't know a whole lot about Juneteenth other than I understand it was when people in Texas found out slavery was over a little later than the other. Well, first of all, slavery was never over. I think I covered that already. Did I?
Hmm. Yes,
So
sir.
slavery was never over. That was an announcement made, but it was just a play on words. I'm not mad about it, but if you study that history, you'd know that. So whoever sells the gas, the soda pops, the hot dogs, the barbecues, and the beer, because these Negroes, the most Negroes are going to eat barbecue and drink beer. I don't do much of that, but I'm not mad at Juneteenth. I think as long as black people are thinking about what it means to be black, learning some history, I have to think that's a good thing. But until we are African centered and understand that a holiday or holy day is a time for us to reflect and to act upon the best of ourselves. And so I don't want to fight Juneteenth, and I don't want to fight
Hmm.
Kwanzaa, even though I've watched Kwanzaa get appropriated. And in America, every holiday we have is going to get appropriated unless we keep it sacred. And so many of our people show up just for the good time. And so I don't know quite how to answer that question. The people that will benefit from Juneteenth will be the ones that sell you the products and the hotel rooms and the
Hmm.
beer and the gas and the stuff. So you know who. But Europeans and other ethnic groups are far better positioned to control those kinds of markets. So we've
Hmm.
not evolved uh, as a group to be able to control our markets because we don't own ourselves and we don't own our own information. We're not the originators and the authors of our own humanity. So I
Hmm.
mean that thing about Juneteenth that would apply to everything, you know.
Hmm.
But now having that been said, uh, uh, I see some value. I'm not prepared to make a full assessment, but anytime black folk are gathering around something that's black, anytime we see that red, black, and green being flown, there's an opportunity. And there may be, even at an elementary level, some consciousness flowing. You're not going to, black folks are not going to go from living in the projects to living in mansions in 5 or 6 years. And I think sometimes we are annoyed, as I am, with how backward thinking we are. But what do you expect out of a people that have never been centered ever? We've never been centered. We have never been black. The black church was never black. Black schools were never black. If it was black, that suggests that there is a theology or a curriculum that is designed to alter the course of history for black folk. That was never the purpose of these places. So given, I said this earlier, given what we've been taught, we have no institutions that are designed. And if we did, the white folks would have blown them up and Negroes would have helped them. But we don't have any established institutions that promote, teach, and act on blackness. So this is, as the quote my daddy said, and so this is what you have. That was his man
Hmm.
said, well, this is what you have. This is what we're talking about now, how to build a new consciousness. And it's going to have to happen through people that are already somewhat conscious, providing new curriculums and new theology, new pathways to the creator. I talk about a new pathway to the creator. That means that we have to reimagine. The
Hmm.
word they use in the Bible is to be born again. But we have to constantly reimagine who we are, what is our role in this world, and what do we want this world to look like, and what strategies are we willing to use to get there. Because that's how that's born. The promised land. I
Hmm.
suggested everybody go back and read the book of Exodus. This is a complete departure, moving from one system to another system, and the drama and the aggravation that people go through. And it's way more than 40 years in the wilderness. It may be
Hmm.
500 years. We've been in
Hmm.
the wilderness for 500, 600 years. But
No
it
doubt.
starts with us understanding that. We keep acting like black folk through osmosis turn out to be great black folk when they don't know who they are yet. We ain't
Hmm.
been taught. I mean, we at least we got a red, black, and green. You'd be surprised how many people that don't realize those colors come from Marcus Garvey. or who
Mm.
Garvey was. And you'd
Right.
be surprised how many people they're trying to be black, and I applaud them. But if you don't know that history, how can you assess anything? You know, we just
Mm.
talked about the global economy. The United States and Western Europe are mega wealthy today because of wealth produced by slave labor and and the death of Native Americans and the the exploitation of the continent of Africa. That's still going on. China right there now is controlling everything. And until we build an African consciousness and a military answer to it, it ain't gonna never stop.
Mm.
So I ain't mad at
Mm.
the men. I ain't no mad at the people at Juneteenth as I at Christmas.
No
At the
doubt.
end of the day, I am glad that there's a red, black, and green, and there's some consciousness there. It's not a lot, but it's way better than what it used to be. And people around the country are recognizing it. It's
Gotcha.
what we do with it that matters.
Right. So, Bobby, so we have exceeded our time, but that's fine
You have a what?
because we have exceeded our time. We went over our
Okay,
time,
yes, sir.
but we fine. I'm perfectly fine. Everybody here is perfectly fine. And so I just want you to expound on this last thing before we leave, and we hope to have you back many more times. You know, this thing is growing. What we're doing, we wanted to bring back the unapologetic black conversation. We wanted to bring back to the forefront what it is that we're doing with the movement. I think we got something very profound in what we're doing with the Mississippi on the Move town talks. We have been effective in what we're doing, and we hope to be more effective. But in a lot of my talks, interaction with our people, I always think about something that you say all the time, and I try and lead the people with this saying, this quote, whatever we consider this. Uh, this is what you taught me a while back. You said a people will be marginalized, discriminated against, persecuted, and even killed until they develop the moral character to stand up for their own humanity. So, and I think, and I just want you to expound right there, as we lead this program. If anybody have anything, um, that they need to say or ask Baba Shabaka, go ahead and do it. But speak on that for a minute,
I
the
think that
humanity
speaks
of
to
black people.
I think that speaks to something I've already said, that if you do not have a stabilizing definition of your own humanity or your own place in this world, if you don't have the capacity to think and act on self-defense, if you don't have the ability to own self-determination. I think Dr. Woodson talks about people who have to depend solely on other people for everything that they need will have no rights in the end than they had in the beginning. And that's why we're still hundreds of years later still having these conversations, because we still are a domesticated people that cannot see beyond their nose is. And so when you have those people, and it also talks about that, it says that we have a moral responsibility and a divine imperative to move toward self-determination and to move toward independence so that we are self-determining. If we aren't self-determined, 80 something percent of the black hair care market is controlled by Koreans. Most of the rest of it is controlled by Palestinians, some form of Arabs. We don't own the things that we consume. And I mention those because we're the people with the kinky hair that we buy these products for. Our women are down buying all of these Brazilian hair and Indian hair, and we're telling the world that we don't love ourselves. Every time I look at black women with all these European extensions and wigs on their head, you're telling the world that we are not a people that love who we are.
Well, Baba, hold up right there. I got assaulted, just the other day because I said that, we call black women calling that self care. That's self-care now. You know, that what you just mentioned is self-care. So go ahead.
I had that conversation in workshops back in the early '90s, and I would try to explain, and and that becomes aggravating trying to explain to black folk what our problems are, and them not wanting to hear it. And one of the things that I would present, two things: the propensity of black athletes to marry white women when they get up to a certain status. If you look on the internet and look up black athletes, some of your top black athletes, you'll find probably 75, 80% of them married to white women, or a white woman is their girlfriend. Now, let me be clear. I'm not mad at white women. I think white women are beautiful, smart, beautiful, nice, and all that kind of thing. But I think for a people that are marginalized, it makes more sense culturally and politically for us to marry within our own group. That's my opinion, and I'm going to stick with that until somebody can show me something different. And I also then I went on, and the black women I got great applause because black women were bothered by the fact that black men were choosing white women over them. And also before I get to my final point, 5 of the first 7 black women that were considered for this place on the Supreme Court, 5 of the first 7 were married to white men. Now, that's a phenomenon that you need to think about. Maybe we want to discuss that at some point. Now, when I would get to black women, I said, why do most black women, and at this time it was even more because it was before people were wearing locks and before braids got really big, why do most black women have a perm in your hair? And they started going into hissy fits. They couldn't explain it. I said, I ain't mad at you. I'm just asking you. Look at a phenomenon. Your hair does not come out of your head straight. What makes you need to straighten it? And they couldn't handle that question. They went crazy. So
Oh
I
yeah.
said, well, and so I was letting them know that that was probably one of the most profound examples of self-hatred is you trying to mimic the physical appearance of another people.
Mm,
That's, if
mm.
you want to talk about cultural colonialism, that's self-hatred in a bottle. I don't care what you say. That's self-hatred. Now, I'm not mad at anybody. I'm simply pointing out an obvious. Now, you go back and deal with that the best way you can. But so, is there a correlation between? But now somebody point and say, well, black men want black women with their hair straight because they said, black men measure black women's beauty by how white they look. So this is all. These are good conversations. I'm not condemning anybody. These are standards of beauty outside of who we look like. We don't look like that. I mean, I guess those of us who have more white blood may have some of those attributes. And then those will be the women that appear to be most beautiful. Then the darker skinned sister with the more African features, she becomes not as attractive. And I wanted people to understand how that promotes colorism, which is a function of white supremacy, and also how it causes us to hate ourselves. And we want to run down there and fix our lips and noses. And I remember growing up, people would buy something called Atra to put on their skin to lighten their skin. It says to cut out the dark spots, but ultimately it was about making the skin lighten. So bad that in what was it, Uganda, uh, Wade Nobles was a professor I was trying to talk about earlier, Dr. Wade Nobles. But in Uganda a few years ago, they had to pass a law to outlaw skin lighteners because these people were
Mm,
so attracted to that lighter skin. And of course, color colorism is an issue amongst our people that we really haven't had these real strong conversations about because you want to fight to get started. You want to fight to get started. So, you
mm,
know, so my conversations and my workshops were asking black folk, why do you know so much about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, but you don't know anything about Queen Nzinga, or you don't know anything about the great pharaoh that united up in Lower Kemet?
mm,
4,000 or 6,000 years ago, how many thousand years ago? European Egyptologists have lied to us anyway. But
mm,
and why do you take Spanish and French, but you're not taking Swahili, or you're not taking Igbo or Yoruba? You're not learning to speak Wolof. And it was
mm,
just a point of conversation to show you how we've been trained to embrace all things European and white and not ourselves.
mm,
And so
mm,
we need to think about, why do we know so much more? Now, see, most of our young people don't know who Medgar Evers was. We know John Kennedy. We don't know about Garvey. As I said, I came out of college and know we don't know about Garvey. And when I talked to an older sister, or she was my age, and she said, "Well, Garvey, he was the one that committed mail fraud, wasn't it?" I said, "No, he was the one that they trumped. That J. Edgar Hoover, and the president at that time, yeah, I think it may have been Coolidge that trumped up those charges on Brother Garvey to break his movement, and the Negroes helped." So the importance of history is so that you know who you are and how you got here, and so you can begin to chart a new course. So, that's all I talk about. I don't know a
Amen.
lot. I know a little bit. I just like to share that and my experiences with whites. Because I'm a conversationalist. I've had a million conversations with white people and Negroes over the years. And so, I learned a lot. I learned that both groups, 9 times out of 10, are going to go in denial about the truth. This is how people avoid the truth or having to face these truths. You deny it. You just deny it, and you're mad at me because I bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what's wrong with
Mm-hmm.
me that makes me want to not deny the truth. It's just something born in me, I guess. And
Mm-hmm.
and, and most of these black scholars, these people, Dr. John Henry Clark said this. He said, "I knew when I was 18 years old," and that was probably way back in the 30s or 20s or something. He said, "I knew when I was 18 years old that I spent the rest of my life telling our story." And that's my job, is to tell that story and
Mm-hmm.
and expose you to what my experience is. My experience has been real and profound. And the name of the book, you mentioned the name of the book that I want to write. And by the way, I had something to do with Dr. Richmond's title of his book, House Niggers. He was going to call it House Negroes. I said, "No, House Niggers. We need to be
Mm-hmm.
profound about that. Don't be ashamed to use that word on them." And so I want to
Mm-hmm.
talk about coons and crackers, a critical examination of the politics of race, because that'll get your attention. You want to
Mm-hmm.
talk about that coon? You want to talk about this cracker? And if you don't like being a coon and cracker, stop being it.
Mm.
Don't be one.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Well, look, Bob, it's been great. A mighty conversation, man. I always love listening to you on the phone, and the audio visual is just an enhancement of that experience that I love to have, even when we just talking on the phone. So this has been very profound to me,
I
Bob.
appreciate you receiving me.
No doubt. We appreciate you allowing us to access you. Your life work. No, 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 no. I tell you this for a reason. It does me good. Your life work is not in vain. And as I continue to push this, I always call the Black Liberation Movement uh, pushing a rock up a mountain of mud. As I continue to push this boulder up a mountain of mud, know that your teaching uh, is what's helping me do that. And they keep me going, man. And so thank you, just like Sister Miller said, for coming on tonight and helping us better understand, our situation. Yeah, Brother Overfield, you need to connect with Baba Shabaka down there in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Brother Overfield is one of people that get down with our program and what we push, this Black Power agenda. Baba Shabaka, I one day hope to be as profound as you. But as I continue to develop, I'm gonna whoop their ass for what I got. I'm gonna whoop their ass for what I got, and I'm gonna keep on pushing.
Can I give
So
out some information before we go?
yeah, yeah, go
Uh,
ahead, go ahead.
you can find me on my Facebook, and I have deliberately the last 6 or 7 months not written a lot. I posted some things, but my Facebook is uh, Shabaka Africa, and you see it spelled up there. Um, uh, Our View. It's called Our View. Shabaka Africa Our View. And my the yeah, that's it. And you can YouTube me, and I had a talk show that I hadn't done recently, but it's called Race, Religion, and Politics: A Conversation with Shabaka. And I have some things to say, and then I have interviewed some people, and sometimes I'm being interviewed. There's some stuff about Kwanzaa, because I like Kwanzaa, but we have to stay true to its principles. And so, um, you can contact me there, but you can go on YouTube and YouTube me. And my email address is Shabaka50. That's 50 at email at Shabaka50 at email.com.
Got you. Got you, Baba. Well, look here, man. We appreciate and love you, man. Continue to allow us to access you. We want to make sure that we have you back on again. I think this show has been very profound and fulfilling.
I said
So,
that wrong. I
yeah,
said it's Shabaka50 at AOL.com. I said email.com. I don't know what's in my
okay.
mind. I'm not a computer person, so y'all have to forgive me. But you can check me out there.
Say it again, Bob. Shabaka 50
Shabaka, that's
AOL.
SHABAKA 50 at AOL.com. Shabaka50 at AOL.com. That's my
Okay.
email address.
All right. All right. So, yeah.
And I like
We,
this forum. And the reason I like this forum is because, for the last few months, I've been trying to stay out of that toxic environment where I'm arguing and debating with folk. I don't want to debate with anybody what I already know to be true. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm,
That's
mm-hmm,
aggravating, frustrating, and it's demeaning. I don't want to.
mm-hmm,
I don't want to engage Negroes in debates.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
The American Negro, I don't want to debate with him. Dr.
mm-hmm,
John Henry Clark said that I debate with my equals, all others I teach,
mm-hmm,
and I'm
mm-hmm,
not going to debate with you what I know. And that's what the
mm-hmm,
American Negro wants to do. He wants the truth to be ignored and deflected from, and that's what you're going to get. And that's what that's why brother wrote the poem, that black shit. It's the first thing. Say, here you go with that black shit.
mm-hmm,
He sit up here, black as the ace of spade,
mm-hmm,
telling you into the black shit. I said, Negro, what do you think you are? But he
mm-hmm,
doesn't want to hear it because he doesn't want to be accountable
mm-hmm,
to what that means.
mm-hmm. No doubt. And that leads me, and we're going to leave with this one right here. Baba Shabaka, 101 right here. You said, if a man can walk to the edge of the sidewalk and look both ways before he crossed the street, that man
Woo.
understand what liberation is.
Yeah,
It's
he
just a matter
does.
of whether he had the courage to carry it out.
I did say that. You're right.
Yes, sir.
All
Thank you,
right.
Bob Shabaka. We'll
All
be
right.
talking, man. Bless you, man.
Peace to everybody.
Peace and
Yes.
power. Thank
All right.
everybody for chiming in tonight. We appreciate you.
Okay.
Peace and power.
All right.